Hey, mic check 1 2 1 2.
Okay, awesome. So again, welcome to the podcast. So what this podcast is about is called, I could finally say the name because I got it trademarked. I own the domains and the Instagrams and all that. It took forever to be able to announce it. But the name of the podcast is called Powered AF. With Abu Fofana. And I know what y'all thinking. Yeah, but AF stands for Abu Fofana. And what I've been doing.
Crazy. I did not know that.
Oh, you did?
No, I thought it was like AF.
Right. Most people do. And so what I've been doing is I've been going and interviewing people, specifically visionaries, people who are pushing the envelope, entrepreneurs in their respective fields. And what I'm trying to have are conversations with them, unfiltered conversations, the things that may not always end up on Instagram and the things that end up on Instagram and how they achieve their highest level of success. So this is the behind the scenes. And it's also what happens when you were on the scene as well. So I've been interviewing so many entrepreneurs. And so I'm going to wait till the siren noise passes because I could hear it as soon as it passes. Okay, so we're going to get started. So in this episode, essentially what I want to do is, highlight your journey to where you are, the business that you're operating, the space that you occupy, and sort of, were you just born for this, or did you, had to experience a lot of, things in life that sort of pivoted you in this. So again, welcome to the Powered AF podcast. In this week's episode, we have so much in store for you, a lot of gems, a lot of strategy, a lot of life lessons, along the way. Today we have Rocky Collins, and we'll get into Rocky's story in just about a second. So Rocky, welcome to the podcast.
Yo, I am honored to be here next to you, Abu, the mastermind, the mogul himself. So it's good to know you as my brother, and it's also nice that we can have these conversations about business as well.
Rocky, in your own words, who is Rocky Collins?
Rocky Collins is an entrepreneur in the male beauty space, really trying to be on the forefront of building what that market looks like in America. He's also somebody who has a huge zest for life and living life to the fullest in every capacity, professionally and personally and romantically and like fitness-y, all of that. And at the end of the day, I just want to have the greatest impact that I can while I'm here.
And it's funny because, we've known each other for a long time now. Yeah. And so to hear you being able to concisely articulate from where you are today, is amazing. You've found yourself. But yes, it wasn't always that case.
No, not at all.
And so take us back. I met you, went to same college together. Mm-hmm. But even take us back further than that. What did you think you were going to be doing when you were a kid? And how would you describe yourself? Were you always a go-getter? Were you always, this entrepreneur? Or, how were you as a kid growing up?
Yeah, I don't know. I definitely wasn't entrepreneurial as a kid, but I always kind of had like a business mind. And I think where that kind of stemmed from, I had the kind of parents who I used to get $5 for every A on my report card. So they already tied compensation and money to my performance. So I knew if that new Madden was coming out and I wanted to get it, then I'm like, all right, I need to get 8 A's on this next report card, or I'm not going to have the new Madden or the NBA Live. And all of that stuff. So definitely have always had like a work ethic just because it's always been tied to like a reward. Monopoly was one of my favorite games growing up, like the actual board game Monopoly. So I always had like an interest in like doing those business deals. And I always played with people that were older than me. And I used to hate when somebody used to like dupe me into a deal. Like they'll do a deal with me and I would think it's a great deal because I get all this like money. And the next thing I know, I'm going broke because I'm landing on all their properties that I just gave away. So I think from an early age, I started to think about like business strategy, and then also that like compensation, the things that I wanted was tied to like hard work. So I think that's probably for as long as I can remember. And then I just kind of like carried forward, like as a kid. And then I think also a big part of that too was like trying to find myself as a teenager when it comes to like, dating and all that type of stuff. And I felt like I was always trying to figure out who I was and like sexuality and all that type of stuff. So a big part of my drive at that point in my life became about like overcompensating.
Yeah.
Like I always felt like if I was the smartest or like the most accomplished, then nobody would care about who I chose to date. So I think that was a big, big driver and why I was so accolades driven as a kid.
And for those that don't are looking at, okay, Rocky Collins googling you,
Mhm.
and you're the CEO of Cali Handsome, right?
Yes.
And so what is Cali Handsome?
CALI Handsome is essentially it's a male grooming brand for men. It's for all men, but it's particularly formulated for men of color as well. And that just comes from a place of I was having trouble finding products for myself that I really liked. And it's interesting because if you would have asked me that question like 8 months ago, it would have been it's just a skincare brand and these are luxury premium skincare products. But now we kind of taken a turn into like the larger male beauty space and is not just like particularly tied to skincare. So if I had to say it in a few sentences, I would really say Cali Handsome is a male cosmetic brand that also provides luxury skincare items with premium ingredients. It's not only going to make you look good, but it's also going to protect your skin for the long term.
Yeah, and I think that, for those that were looking for the context of, who is Rocky, because you've wore many hats.
Oh
You're
yeah.
the CEO, but like you've worked at the Fortune 100 and 500
Yeah,
companies.
yeah.
You studied the brands, you were a
Yeah.
buyer.
Yep.
So it took you this long road to get to where you are today.
Yeah.
So when we talk about, you as a child, you were this go-getter, you were figuring things out. And then you transitioned, into college. So when you get to college, did you then say, okay, I'm going to become an entrepreneur now? What was that journey like in
No,
college?
not at all. Like when I went into college, I remember thinking, let me find the career that's going to set me up for that corporate ladder. Again, like my goal going into college was let me find a route that's going to get me to the corner office. Like that was my dream at that point. And then even interning in college, once I did find my first business passion after trying accounting and stuff, which became like the corporate side of fashion retailing, and at that point, I'm like, okay, cool. The highest level at that point that you can get in that lane is a global brand president. So that was my aim from about like 19 and even after graduation, like that was the thing. I didn't think about like entrepreneurship or starting my own business. To be frank with you, my dad has always been an entrepreneur and I saw the volatility growing up where like, you can come home one day and oh, we just made this major deal, $20,000. But then there's also times where like that could be the only check he brings home for like 6 months. You know what I mean? So I was kind of opposed to like the volatility of entrepreneurship and a risk. So I really had my heart set on like that corporate ladder, get the corner office, be the global brand president. Like that was exactly what I thought my life would look like.
So when you were in college, you were, entrepreneurship wasn't on, it was on your mind because you'd see, your dad, your
Yeah.
come home, and you'd see, sometimes it'd be a big win, other times it wouldn't be a win.
Yeah.
And so did that deter you when you were in college to say, you know what, this isn't an area that I really want to explore?
Yeah, it definitely made me want to choose a path that was a bit more stable or what I felt would be stable. I mean, now we all know that nothing is stable. Like there's no career that's stable or no career path that is going to land you in a job that there's no risk. But yeah, at that point I'm just like, nah, I want something that I know is going to be like a guaranteed check and guaranteed wealth is I think what I was more so
Did you
looking
grow
for.
up in a household that was stable with both your mom and dad in terms of income, or was that safety, that yearning for safety came from somewhere else?
Yeah, so it was kind of like up and down. Like at first, it was just me, my mom, and my sister. And my mom has always had a stable job working for the government, not like a ton of money, but stable. And then my dad, they ended up getting like married when I was like 11 or 12. So then, like when my dad moved in, then it was just kind of like his entrepreneurship was a bit up and down, and then he would kind of like get a regular job and hold on to that for a few months, but he always kind of like left that for the sake of his business. And so, I mean, and I seen how that created like a lot of arguments in a
Yeah.
household of like, you know, what I mean? They just created a lot of
Yeah.
shit that I was like, eh.
So you had decided, you know what, this isn't
Yeah, I
really.
was like, nah, forget that. Like, I
Yeah.
want to make sure I'm gonna be able to pay for my Bentley outside. Like, I don't want to have to go to deal with all of that. And I also saw like the, you know, domestic conversations that it caused, and like layaway for your kids back to school. Like, I didn't want to have to deal with that. So I
Yeah.
was like, nah.
And I think that, as you mentioned, played a factor, right? Played a factor in your decision making because it came from your own personal experience. It
Yes.
happened in your backyard, and you were able to see, oh wow, this caused a lot of
Yeah.
chaos. Like I actually don't want to pursue this space. So when you
Yeah.
decided, okay, I am going into work and I'm going to go get a job, what were you looking at that time that interests you?
I by the time I graduated, so before when I was first starting looking for internships in college, I was just trying to go with the things that I thought were like the surefire ways to wealth, like the finance, the accounting, the I majored in marketing, so I'm like, oh, let me go work in the marketing department. And then that first internship kind of punched me in the mouth because I'm like, oh, marketing is not fun. Like it's data driven, depending on what role you're in. But the I had interned at a place called Owens and Minor, which is a distributor of healthcare supplies. So their marketing was like all numbers driven. I went there and I was like, oh, like I'm not going to be able to do that. And then I'm not going to be able to do like the finance and accounting. Like I just didn't have fulfillment in it. And then I remember randomly being at a career fair at Penn State, and I literally bumped into the recruiter from American Eagle, their corporate retail side. And she was like, "Hey, I like your blazer." It was like a teal blazer with black lapels. Everybody else is in there with like blue suits, black suits, and nobody would talk to me from those other big companies because I was like, I didn't look like I probably fit the mold. And she like commented me on my outfit, and I was like, "Oh, thank you." And the next thing you know, she's like, "You're a pretty stylish dude. Do you know about buying?" And I'm like, "No." She invited me to a information session they had that night, and like once I saw that people make careers out of deciding what clothes other people should wear, I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. Like this is that shit that I want to do. And then I interned with them that summer, and by the end of the summer, I had a full time job offer.
Mm.
So I went into my senior year, before my senior year, with a full time job offer.
What were you doing for them that summer?
I was interning in their buying department. So like essentially, what buying is you are developing products. You're literally everything from like, oh, we should carry this hoodie, we should carry it in black, we should charge $39.99 for it. It should only be in the stores from November to February when the seasonality is appropriate. When should we discount it? You're deciding what product, what price, and what time, and in what colors should be in the stores. Is essentially what the role of a buyer is.
And then through that experience that summer, you decided I'm going to go into buying or I'm going to go into marketing.
I went into buying.
Mm.
I went into buying. At that point, I was like, forget marketing. Like, I'm just gonna go into buying. I literally love the creativity of fashion. I love that I could take inspiration from things that I like. I like to shop already. I like being on Instagram. It was nothing for me to take a screenshot of something cool that I saw somebody wearing and come into the office like, hey, we need to make our version of this for our customer. I love that.
So you get back to school after that internship.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is your goal to get a full-time position at this company, or how did that now change the rest of your experience at that
Well,
time?
they had already given me my full time offer before my internship even ended. Like the
Oh
last
wow.
day when I walked out of the office with all of my stuff, I also had like a hard copy of a full time job offer. So I went into my senior year honestly big chilling. Like I had no worries. I had a full time job offer that was on the higher end of like what graduates in my year were coming out with. Like all I had to do was pass at that point. Me being like the accolade driven person, though, I still, you know, had a few goals I wanted to hit before I left like college. But in terms of career wise, like that wasn't on my mind going in senior year. It was more like, okay, I'm in Kappa Alpha Psi. How can I get undergraduate brother of the year? I was on homecoming court at Penn State. How can I have the biggest impact on campus? It was more about like racking up the accolades with the last 2 semesters I had in college. Career was on the back burner because I knew I was going to American Eagle.
Now, did you have any other internships during your time there, or any other places that you garner a different type of experience?
Yeah, so the first one I had was the Owens and Minor place, which was the healthcare supply distributor that sucked.
So you learned from that experience that's not the space that you want to do.
I learned from that that like hardcore like data driven roles are not for me. Of course,
Mm.
the numbers drive pretty much everything, but 90%, if the numbers are going to drive like 90% and it's going to be like it's going to lack creativity, then I cannot do that role.
Okay. Okay. So the rest of your time in college, then you spent it knowing that you had this full time opportunity and
Yeah.
job. And so you graduate, you go to your first job. What's that like?
I graduate, I go into the workplace. It was different.
Yeah. Because typically it's not the same as when you intern there,
Yeah.
right?
Like when you intern at a place, like it's nice and it's fun and all that, and they're trying to woo you because they want to attract talent. They want you to love your experience. So that way when they give you this offer, not only do you want to come, but you loved it so much that you might not fight as much on the pay scale. Or if somebody gives you a better offer, you're like, you know what, but I love this place more. And so when you come back as a full-time hire, I mean, the pressure is obviously different. Like as an intern, like you're trying to make a name for yourself, make an impact. But like when you come as a full-time hire, now it's like you have to add to the team. Like the learning curve is a lot steeper. People aren't as patient. I will say though, shout out to American Eagle Outfitters. They were definitely one of the best, even to this day, one of the best places that I've worked on a corporate side. But yeah, it was like it was different. I felt like I was kind of thrown on a deep end in a ways that I don't know, even the work that I was doing as an intern, I'm like, oh, I can do this. So I expected to be doing that kind of stuff as my entry level job. And I went in there and it was like, oh no, no, no. It's kind of like you spend a summer doing algebra and then you go into the year like, oh, I mastered algebra. I've been practicing all summer. I can do this. And you get in there and they're like, no, 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 this is calculus now. And you're like, oh, whoa, wait a minute. So that's kind of like what it felt like when I first got in there. And then of course you deal with the corporate politics for the first time. And just learning all the when you learn your counterpart gets paid more than like all of that stuff comes into play, and you're like, I mean,
So when you started, did you still love it as much, or you were trying to figure out where you fit?
I didn't like it as much
Okay.
when I first started. I mean, within my first 4 months, I went to HR and was like, this doesn't work for me. And again,
And what specifically wasn't working out? Or
um,
what challenges did you have when you first got there?
well, for one, like the department that I was in wasn't exciting for me. When I interned in a much faster paced category. I think I was in like men's graphic tees and all that type of stuff. But when I first started as a full time hire, I was in men's denim. Like your boot cut is your boot cut. That's not changing every month. You know what I mean? So I went into a category that was boring, and then also I felt like at that time the menswear team was very frat boyish. Like they all were like the same kind of frat boys from like colleges in Ohio. So like the climate, I wasn't necessarily. I want to. I can adapt in a lot of different situations, but like intrinsic, like truly in here, like I didn't necessarily feel great about that fit. And then also I started out at their Pittsburgh headquarters, which is not working out for me. I felt like I had just had a zest for life that was bigger than Pittsburgh. Like nothing against Pittsburgh, it just wasn't for me. So between like not really vibing with the city, I had just moved to not really liking the role I was in because it lacked the creativity that I had over the summer. And then like the actual corporate politics of like the team and the environment that I was on, I was like, oh no, this
Yeah.
doesn't work for me.
And I remember, when you did get your offer and you about to go start, you had a clear idea of what you thought you'd be doing, and it
Yeah,
turns
yeah,
out it,
yeah.
it was completely different.
It was.
Now, because you decided to go on this path, one of the big things I asked you about earlier was, the entrepreneurship versus the linear path of
Mm,
saying, you know what, this is the next best step. So when you got your job offer, taking a step back, when you got your job offer, how much was it? And was it so much in your mind, you're like, oh my God, this is really good for the family, right? No one is
yeah,
making this amount. How did that change your life when you saw that number that you were
yeah.
getting offered full
Oh my
time?
god, let me tell you, like at that time, this was 2014. This was in 2014. So the starting salary at that point was 48,000, which for me at that time, coming from Camden, New Jersey, I'm like, oh my God, like I know most people's parents where I'm from, after, 25 years on their jobs, they might be making 50, 52. So I'm like, oh my God, for me to be 22 making 48, and then my rent in Pittsburgh was like 700. So I'm like, oh, I'm gonna be balling. And it's just so crazy because like coming from my background, I was more than happy to sign on for that. But like knowing what I know now, or even like some of my counterparts who were there, their backgrounds were different, where they were like not accepting of that shit, you know. And it wasn't until like I found out about like that whole how the whole money thing works that I started to advocate for myself. And I actually got quite pissed off, honestly. Like when I was in Pittsburgh for 4 months and I went to HR and was like, this doesn't work for me, yeah, yeah, yeah. Again, American Eagle being great partners, they moved me to the New York design office where I can be more creative and on the
Mm.
women's wear team. But after a few months there, I went to drinks with a coworker and I had found out that like other people were getting paid more than me. And she was like, yeah, they didn't give you a relocation like bump for the adjusted cost of living. Like it costs more to live in New York than it does Pittsburgh. Like they always do that. And I was like, no, nobody did that. Nobody told me. So I've been in New York for 6 months and I'm still getting a Pittsburgh salary of
Wow.
48K. And then the literally, it pissed me off too how easy it was to get them to change it. Like soon as I went to HR, or I went to my direct manager first, and we did that process with HR. It literally took less than 2 weeks, and they were like, "Oh yeah, of course, no problem. We should have been did this 55K." And I was like, "So you mean to tell me
For six
for the
months.
last 6 months you were paying me like 8 grand less, 7 grand less?" Like it quite pissed me off. I'm not gonna lie. And then from that point, I started to be very conscious about like the you don't get what you deserve, which is what I naively believed. You get what you don't even get what you work for. You get what you command. And like
Right, right.
you know what I
And
mean?
someone once told me like you get what you negotiate.
Exactly. So that's the thing. It's not you get what you deserve. It's not you get what you ask for. You get what you negotiate. And I learned how to be prepared for those conversations. I learned how to like literally come with like your receipts for yourself and why you should be getting what you're getting. And then I also, not at American Eagle, but have been in places who didn't give what I felt I needed, and I was willing to and did walk away because
Okay.
that's part of it too. Like
Right.
when you have your baseline number, and especially when you feel like your work is exceeding that, like when I left that job that I walked away from, I was like, oh hell no! If you don't pay me at least this, I'm out.
Yeah. So what was that experience like? So
Woo!
here's you now advocating for yourself, starting to bet on yourself and your trajectory and where you're
Yeah.
trying to go. What you don't have to get into, the super, details if you don't want to, but what was that like when you approached this job that you're working at and
Mhm.
you weren't being paid the value that you could get elsewhere?
Yeah.
How did you know you had to go in there and you had to be willing to walk away? Because most people aren't willing to do that.
Right. They're not. And it's so in between this time as well of like when I first had that experience at American Eagle in New York to the opposite example, I was at guest headquarters out here in LA. There was probably a good 4 to 5 years in between that time. So part of it was like me maturing and becoming self-aware of my abilities and what I bring to a corporation instead of like, oh, I'm just grateful to be here. Can I have this? And more like, oh, I know I bring value because I know like the revenue that you're getting as a direct result of my work, like my creativity, my styles, I see on a paper like how much business I'm bringing you. So after 5 years of growing up, I approach that quite differently. But I mean, for me, the environment being at guest out here, which is completely different from American Eagle in a sense where like it was toxic as fuck, literally the worst place I had ever like worked at. And I don't mean to like bash anybody or anything, I'm just being honest about my experience. It was really terrible, and it sucks because like the vice presidents and stuff, I really admired them and had great relationships with them, but my direct chain of command, it just didn't work. And everything about that environment, I mean, I felt everybody there was overworked and underpaid. And I think what I quickly realized, and after having like conversation with people who are like drunk and they reveal more, I'm like, oh, these motherfuckers don't understand their worth. A lot of them, Guess was their first job in fashion. And so when they went through the chain at Guess, that's all that they knew in two ways. In terms of pay, that's all that they knew, Guess's pay scale. And then in terms of responsibility for their title, and where I would be like, oh nah, you managing XYZ, and this like you should be a senior buyer. You should be a merch manager. Like, what are you? You're an associate buyer. Like, there's only one step above entry level. So they didn't really know. And then even like their pay, and they're like, I remember look, I'm very transparent. I think we all can benefit from it.
Yep.
So I remember telling one of my coworkers who um, was a level above me. We were having a conversation, and we end up getting on salaries. And I told her how much I had like negotiated for, because there was two times I negotiated, and they went with it both times, and then the third time they said no, and I dipped. But when I told her after that second time, she was pissed because I was making like I think I was making more than her, and
Well,
she was a level above me and managed way more dollar volume. She managed more people, like, and so it was like a shock for her.
yeah.
But I'm like, that's what happens when you just don't know, and you spent all your time at this one company, and you also don't have the conversations.
Right. So you decided, okay, you see everything happening. You
Hmm.
decide, okay, I'm going to go out on the market and get another offer and then approach this company that I'm working for and let them know, hey, here's my new number. And we're also willing to walk away if they didn't meet that number.
So I did both of those approaches. The time I walked away, I didn't have a second offer.
Wow.
But so when I first got to Guess, it was on like a temp contract because I had started develop. I was at L'Oreal before that, and I started developing CALI HNDSME, and I didn't want any conflict of interest, so I left L'Oreal. Guess was the first like temp freelance contract I got because they were looking for somebody like me. And then when they tried to give me a full time offer, I'm like, sure, I'll do that, but like it's gonna be for more than what you put on this paper. And at that point, I was already providing value to the team where they were like, all right, fuck it, sure. And then the second time when I asked for more money, I had been at the job for like a year, a little over a year, and it literally was just fucking draining, overworked, where I felt like I was doing work that was two levels above um, my position at the time, and leaps and bounds below the pay that I should have been getting. So I got to the point where I had learned from my previous times on the East Coast of how to prepare for those conversations. So when I came to them that second time, I'm like, look, this is how much I'm managing. Here's a list of all of my responsibilities that I do on a daily, weekly, monthly. Here's how I contribute to the team. Then also the proof was in the numbers. Like my categories were the shining stars for the accessories department.
So someone that's listening in and they're at their job
Mm-hmm.
and they feel like they're not getting paid what they're worth, what would you recommend they do in order to prepare for these types of conversations?
I would say you need to do, before you talk to anybody, you need to do an honest assessment of your role and how you are executing that role. Like I literally would pull up either the job description and maybe add your own like words to it of like what your managers are saying their expectations for you are. Start there. Like what are the on paper expectations for your job? And then how are you performing against those expectations? Are you just meeting those expectations? Because if that's the case, then like that's not you have to be honest with yourself. Do you deserve a raise? But if you can honestly say that I'm exceeding at X, Y, and Z, and you know what, I'm also doing all these other things more, which is literally my boss's job, but I'm taking them off of her plate. If you find yourself in a position where you're exceeding the expectation at your core responsibilities, and then you're also doing additional responsibilities, you probably have some damn good leverage to walk in and in a very respectful way, but like to really walk in and advocate for yourself. But you gotta know that you're doing the job, and you gotta have like receipts essentially.
Right. And I think that's really helpful because there's people that are listening in, and we'll get to, Rocky's entrepreneurial start and journey, but there are people listening in and they're wondering like, wow, so you had these different transitions
Hmm.
from the Pittsburgh, going into New York, and
Yeah.
then you make your way to LA, and we'll talk about that. But they're looking at it and say, well, how did he know his value? Did he learn this? Did he read a book? Did this book teach him, or was it
Kind
just
of.
through your experience? Was it having these conversations with coworkers? But how do you even ask them? Because not every coworker is willing to share that information
Right.
with you. And so for someone trying to evaluate their own value,
Mm.
right? What would you recommend? Who should they have a conversation with first, or what's a book that you recommend that they read
Yeah.
to really help them get started in that area?
Well, I mean, like the easiest place to start is go on these job websites and see what competitors are offering for your same positions, and the position above you and the position below you. That's like the easiest way to do it. And I always went to I'm pretty sure it's still around, glassdoor.com.
Yep.
I always went to glassdoor.com because they have like salary ranges per company. They have like reviews and stuff that people will like leave and all of that. So the first thing you literally need to do is like do competitive research and see like what other people are offering for your level. Um, and if that means like going through like a few rounds of like some phone interviews or whatever, even if you're not really looking at the job, but like you just want to see what's out there and what the going rate is, like you have to do it. Like, I mean, I don't know if my gas station on my corner has the best prices until I drive past another gas station. Like that's the
Right.
only way to know. So I would say start there when you're just green into an industry and in a job. And then as you build up a tenure in any field, like you'll just start to know through your experience. And also, that's why it's important for people to go to different companies. Like it's just not the way of the world to stay at a company from entry level for the rest of your life. Like that is not how you get paid. That is not how you like really learn the game. Um so my biggest benefit too, I've never stayed at a job for more than 2 years. It's always been like a year and 11 months was the longest. And so by me one doing a competitive research and then also by me going to actually other companies, and then by the time you get a bit more seasoned and senior, you probably have some established relationships with some dope people where you're like, oh, Abu's now the buyer at so and so. Boo, what Lucky Brand over there paying? What y'all paying y'all folks over there? And then like, yo, well, I'm getting this, or if they don't even reveal their own, they're like, hey, I'm a director now, but I just hired a merch manager who's in your position, and we just offered that person 88 or 90. Now I'm like, oh, so that's the going market rate right now. And
Yeah.
then you like look at what you got going on.
No,
So
no, I think that's really helpful because there's so many people I know that are in this exact position,
mm,
and there's so many people I know that probably reach out to you, and you're like, "Look, this is what you have to do," and you're
yeah,
probably always giving this advice. So for those listening in who are at their desk right now at their company, feeling like they're overworked and undervalued, this is something to consider really taking a hold of. Some of the tips that you recommended that they could do. Now, you start understanding and realizing your value.
mm,
You start, transitioning to different companies, taking on different responsibilities. There's this, you're in LA now, right? But you didn't always just start in LA because you started in Pittsburgh.
yeah.
So what happened that brought you from New York after Pittsburgh, right, to LA? Was it you were coming to Silicon Valley to start a company? What brought you
Yeah.
to LA originally, and how did that
Yeah.
start, evolving into something else?
So, I mean, one thing about me, I'ma always honor my impulses and my gut and my passions. That is one thing. Like I'm going to follow my passion. If I find myself consistently daydreaming about a thing, at some point I'm going to open my fucking eyes and be like, okay, I'm going to go pursue that thing. So, when I was in New York doing a fashion thing or whatever, I had got to a point where well, one of my friends, Tamara, had took me to like one of her like acting classes, and I ended up like really getting into the art, but like the craft of acting and the entertainment industry and telling stories. And then I found myself started to drag my feet on the subway to work at American Eagle, which was a dream job. So I'm like, why am I dragging my feet to this dream job? Like that's crazy. So I really, just had to be honest with myself and was like, hey, my passion right now is to go chase storytelling and getting in the entertainment industry. And honestly, like the moment I had that realization, I had read what's the name of that book? The Alchemist.
That's a
I
good
read The
one.
Alchemist, and after finishing that book, I was like, you know what, I'm out. So I put in like my 2 weeks at American Eagle. I ended up giving them 3 weeks because I really love that company. So I wanted to make sure the transition was good. So that's yeah. I moved to LA with no job lined up. I had about 10K saved up from like my bonuses. So I had about 10K saved up, and my sister lived out here. So I knew I had a room that I was only paying $350 a month for.
So you decided to make this leap to pursue acting. So
Yeah,
you went
yeah,
from
yeah.
Rocky the fashion to,
Yeah.
Rocky the actor.
Yes, I did.
And you took that leap of faith. And I remember you sent me a text message. I forgot what year, but it was in December. And I
Yeah.
still, no, top of January, I still have that text. And you're like, it's official. I'm moving to LA. And so you come to LA, not for entrepreneurship or entrepreneurial endeavors,
Yep.
but essentially when you're in acting, you are an entrepreneur because
You gotta hustle.
you have to go hustle.
Yeah.
So you get to LA, now you're Rocky the actor.
Yeah.
What was that like pursuing acting?
Oh, acting is rough because you really have no control over your fucking career. Like you literally can be the best at what you do, go into an audition, kill it, and still not be chosen. And it has nothing to do with you a lot of times because I've been on the other side of the table as well as a producer, and it really has nothing to do with you. Sometimes you could be the greatest actor, but maybe you might outshine the star who like the vehicle is actually for, or maybe you're a great actor, but like you don't really look like you can be the family member of who we decided needed to be the lead or whatever. Or maybe you just remind the director of his ex-wife and he's like, no, like I don't like redheads because my ex-wife was a redhead and she took all my money. Like you have no control a lot of times. Like you can control what you can control, like studying your craft, but a lot of times you really can't control. And I didn't like that. I didn't like that at all. And it was the same with like with talk show hosting because when I first got here, I ended up on Revolt for a bit doing that talk show. But I didn't like that so much about my career was in other people's hands. Again, I'm used to like, oh, I need to do X, Y, and Z to hit this goal. I need to do X, Y, and Z to get this accolade or get this award. I'm used to that kind of thing. And the entertainment industry is none of that shit matters.
Right, right. So what do you feel like was a big what did you feel like you learned from that experience of pursuing acting? And would you say you were a successful actor during that time period or what?
No, to be honest, and the reason why I say no is not that money is everything, but I would book things, especially the Revolt thing was a high profile things, but I wasn't making any money. So it's like it depends on how you define success. I define success by the lifestyle that I'm able to live. I was not able to live the lifestyle that I wanted. Like I slept on an egg carton on the floor, not even a mattress, for the first 6 months. And then my first bed after that, one of my friends gifted it to me because she had left grad school at USC and needed to give her bed away. So I just say that to say I wasn't able to live the lifestyle. So I don't think I wouldn't consider that a successful time in my life, but it was very transformative in terms of like I learned so much about who I am, like pursuing life as an artist. Like, cause you gotta go in internal and dig deep and figure out what your triggers are and what drives you and what your passion. But it also started to really push on that entrepreneurial spirit because the biggest thing was I absolutely hated having the fate of my life in somebody else's hands. And I was like, you know what? Like, I want to take that power back. And so after maybe 2 years of literally pounding the pavement, sometimes booking shit, sometimes not booking shit, I was like, you know what? I need to take my control back. How do I do that? I need to make my fund my own projects. And that led me to, okay, let me go back to my degree and my experience in fashion and start doing freelance jobs. And then yeah.
So you decided to go back to corporate. You say, you know what? I did fashion for 2 years, and did you have a timeline on it? Was your timeline 2 years before you made a decision on what was next?
Not, so it wasn't necessarily a timeline when I decided to go back into fashion. It was more so I'm gonna go back to get money to fund my own art projects. I literally thought that was the goal for me when I went back into freelancing in the corporate world. I'm like, I'm going to just work so that I can have money to build my own projects where I don't have to worry about another producer telling me, no, like you're not good enough for my project. So that was literally the goal. Let's go work, get some money so I can fund my own stories, have my own stories to tell. And at that point, I started really getting heavily into wanting to tell stories and for like the LGBTQ community. Just because I felt like when people often met me and then they're like, "Oh, wait, that's your boyfriend you date?" Like, but you seem so cool. And I'm like, "Yeah, because what the fuck?
Mm,
Why would my dating preference matter?"
yeah.
And so I started to really lean into wanting to tell stories that just showed all the different shades and colors and normalcy, essentially. So that was my goal going back into corporate. Let's get some money so that way I can fund my own projects. And then it just so happens that like through that journey, like things started to shift. Like I think the first place I went to work at was Vince, the higher end fashion brand, and then I stopped Vince, and then I ended up at L'Oreal, and everything fucking shifted, bro. Like I ended up in their men's grooming headquarters out here, and it was there where I was like, it almost took me back to that time at Penn State where I'm like, oh my God, people get paid to decide what other people should wear. When
Mm.
I was like, oh my God, people get paid to find better ways for us to wash our face. And I've always been into skincare anyway. So when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, not only can I do this, but I could do it better than these motherfuckers. Like, because I would come to them with ideas and they wouldn't implement. So I'm like, okay, like at some point, if you're not gonna do it, I'm gonna do it. And then I also at that time was like looking for a more luxury skincare experience myself because I had a little more dollars. So I'm like, I ain't want the Target $8 face wash. Like I wasn't drinking Vlad or whatever. I was drinking premium alcohol. So I'm like, I wanted premium skincare products. And I tried all like the kills and shit and would go to Sephora and pay $68 for shit. And it just wouldn't be suitable for me or my friends when I had them try it. So I'm like, okay, there's a need for this kind of product. I'm seeing the inner workings of it at L'Oreal now. Like there's something I can do with it here. And that's kind of how like I got bit with that, like, oh shit, I could launch a skincare brand. And like, cause prior to that, I had never even thought about.
So you decided that you wanted to start a skincare brand. What experience specifically, because you didn't start any skincare brand, you started specifically for men's skincare brand. So you
Yeah.
were working at L'Oreal, and what didn't you see in the market that prompted you to say, I want to start a men's skincare brand?
Well, the thing that my personal experience, honestly, was like the first core factor. Again, when I was at L'Oreal and I was trying to find a more luxury skincare product for myself, when I didn't want that $8 face wash anymore, and all the kills and shit didn't work for me and left my face dried out and all that type of shit, I specifically just saw that I had a hard time finding it. And then talking to my friends, Sabir, Egypt, and they all had the same issue. I'm like, yo, what the fuck? Like, somebody has to do it. And again, at that time, my first thought wasn't, I'm going to do it. My first thought was, let me do the research and see if my company could like implement some of these changes. But like, it didn't really go that far up the chain of command because they weren't.
So you're telling me you would go research this in the market.
Yeah.
You then go take the research to the company to
Yeah.
implement, and they did what with it?
Nothing. It was like such a bottleneck in the chain of command where like they weren't even like really open to it. And at that time, I think like their men's grooming brand, it was all about like just sales, like get the product into as many stores as we can and sell in and sell out. They weren't really interested in like product innovations at all, which now I understand why people in skincare only have like, you know, your face wash is your face wash for like 10 years. Cause that whole process of getting that formula going is whew.
So you're saying now you understand why it was moving slow. However, you were bringing them all the information.
Yeah, I'm just like, yo, like, can we do this? And like,
most people wouldn't do that. Matter of fact, not a lot of people would take their research and go to the company and say, hey, I found, better ways to be innovative.
I think for me, it probably stemmed from my job as being a buyer. Like when I worked in fashion, that's what I did. I used my creativity and what I saw on the street and the trends I saw on the runways. And then I came back and worked with my designers like, yo, we need to develop a product like this. Like we need to do our version of X, Y, and Z. Or you see that new Virgil collection, like our customer at our price point is going to want a similar style like that. Next year, we need to get on the ball. So it was intrinsically something I had been doing my entire career. So when it came to skincare, it was no different. Like I didn't think like, oh, I'm going to do it. I'm like, oh, we could be doing this better. Like, how could the company like do this better?
Yeah, it's interesting because here you are, you're very optimistic, right? You're like, we could do this or I can do this, right? Mm-hmm. But you just spent the last 2 years, and your words when I asked you, did you feel like it was a success? You was like, well, no. So where were you mentally? Like, how do you just bounce back from that, and now all of a sudden, like, you're upbeat again? Like, for those 2 years, where were you mentally?
Yeah. Not great. It was quite volatile, to be honest. It was like a lot of ups and downs. Like I said, like when I had carved out those 2 years of like acting and hosting and Revolt and all that, you book a project and you might be good and you're currently on a show. So every promoter in LA is like, oh, come out, I got a table for you, blah, blah, blah. And you're just like balling out. You're standing on couches every night and you're in the studio every day and life feels great, even though financially it wasn't really there. But especially when that TV show goes off and then like you hit up that promoter like, yo, what's up, bro? It's Wednesday. And they're like, ooh, it's going to be 50 at the door. It's like, motherfucker, it was when I was on TV, you want to be in here in your section for free. You was begging me to come out. And now that the show is off air, now you're like, ooh, you might have to wait outside for it. Just was so it was definitely an emotional time period. And again, like money had like dried up. But
how'd you deal with that?
I mean, you really don't have a choice at some point, do you? Like at the end of the day, at some point things do become very black and white. Like sure, it's like all the stress factors and all like the stressing out and all that type of stuff, which I did a shit ton of. Weight fluctuated a little bit, but at some point it becomes very black and white, and it's like, okay, you're gonna move forward or you're not. Are you gonna like try to find a different path or you're not? And the solution that I landed on to like my acting worries was, okay, just go start fucking freelancing so you can get your own money and then you can like build your own projects. So like while I was at L'Oreal, I wasn't really thinking about skin. That's why I didn't care. I was like, oh, this this could be a thing, but let me give it to L'Oreal because that's not my thing. I don't give a fuck. I'm here for a paycheck and I want to invest it in art. So if they're building it, you know what I mean? That's why it literally didn't click until they kept not doing it. And I started getting frustrated and I'm like, I need y'all to do it because I need a product like this. So I need y'all to do it. And when they weren't doing it, that frustration led me to being like, okay, let me go to Google. Skincare Production Labs, Los Angeles. Like that's how the fuck it started. Skincare Production Labs, Los Angeles. For the biggest question I get all the time, people's like, oh, how did you know how to start? Did you have formula experience before? And I'm like, no, I never made a formula before. I'm not a chemist. I'm terrible at sciences. But, you know, we all have the power of the internet. I just Google search skincare production labs. I started cold calling them and just asking the questions like, hey, how does a person start the skincare like own product? A lot of them would just like hang up because they'd be like, oh, you definitely can't do 10,000 unit order minimums if you don't know what the fuck you're doing. But, you know, I was fortunate to just keep going. And maybe by like the 8th or so lab, I started realizing that like, okay, the smaller the lab, the more they answer your questions. So I started reaching out to smaller boutique manufacturers, and that's how I just learned as I went along.
So you essentially are saying you could use Google to start.
Yeah.
If you have an idea, it takes a lot of time because you have to go through that research phase, right?
Yeah.
And I think most people don't start because of that research. They're not willing to put the hours in researching. And after researching so many days, so many hours, you start discovering things, such as, well, if I reach out to a smaller, manufacturer, like they'll pick up, or a smaller facility, they'll pick up versus these larger facilities as well. And so as you're navigating, trying to figure out, because of this frustration, they're not willing to do it. So you're like, you know what, I'm going to just do it myself. What were some of the challenges in building the skincare brand that you wanted to pursue?
Whew, oh my God, everything. I mean, everything. Even learning like the components that went into making a skincare product. And what I mean by that, I don't mean like knowing the formula. Like you do not need to know the exact the discovery hours. Yes, absolutely. You don't need to know how to do the exact formula because the teams at the manufacturers, they have chemists. You just need to be able to articulate what it is that you want, and be realistic about like the price point that you want it at, and have a frame of reference for like, what ingredients you want or what results you want the product to have. But so, I mean, I didn't know any of that. I didn't know that there were chemists that worked at labs. I didn't know that I also had to think about like the componentry in the bottles. Like I didn't really know like about like minimums and all that type of stuff. I mean, fairly familiar from the fashion side of things, but it's completely different when you're dealing with the formula. And then when you have like things that people are going to put on their skin, now you're dealing with like approvals and all that type of shit. I didn't need that when I was in fashion, but you going to make a product that's like a skincare or anything like that. Like you like you going to have to get pass some tests. So it was just all of that.
Yeah. So you were essentially figuring this out for the first time. No experience at all.
Getting an LLC, getting a name trademark, like all of this stuff was things that I just was kind of stumbling through.
Was it because you had no knowledge of how hard it would be?
Oh yeah.
Do you believe that's why you kept going?
Let me tell you, I think being so naive in the beginning was probably a very, very strong strength that I had, because I was very naive and I didn't really see any, like, when I first started, at least, I didn't see as many roadblocks as that there would be, I was just like, yo, well, I mean, I guess I could do this. Like, let me just see if I can. Well, Google said this, and I was on YouTube, and they said that. So, like, I mean, if I call this lab, why wouldn't, I mean, they do Kylie skin. Like, why wouldn't they do mine?
Right.
They make skincare for Kylie. Jenner, why wouldn't they do skincare for me? Like, lo and behold, they were like, oh, if you don't do 10,000, like, So yeah, I think that naivety was a benefit at first because I didn't really see those limits. I didn't self-impose limits on myself. I didn't place any glass ceilings on myself. Like whatever no came my way came from like something else. It didn't come from me telling myself no. Like, oh, that's too hard. I can never do. Like if you ask me to run a marathon tomorrow, I'm telling myself no because I know that I can't do it. But when that headspace that I was in, it was just like, oh, this needs to happen next. Oh, like I mean, why wouldn't I be able to do it?
Yeah, and it's funny because you saw that as a strength, not knowing.
Yeah,
Some
yeah,
people
yeah.
think not knowing is a weakness, but if you were to know everything, and I always say, if I had to start my businesses over again from what I know now, I don't think I would ever even start the business.
Exactly.
And so not knowing almost like you don't. It almost when you hear a no, you're just like, okay, well, let me go somewhere else.
Exactly. Exactly.
And I think that's really important for entrepreneurs to understand is that you didn't just go to Google and found the first, link at the top of the page and was the manufacturer. You ordered your first samples and they were perfect and they came in and you built your store because you already knew how to do that. Like, this was a series of learning, a series of not knowing, which you used as a positive and a benefit instead of a weakness of saying, well, because I don't know, I'm not going to start.
Exactly. And I think there's a difference between not knowing about certain aspects and then also like not being educated because you lack the discipline to at least try to figure some shit out. You know what I mean? Like that Google and YouTube University, like you definitely need to learn as much as you can in terms of like about the process or the steps or whatever. Like you'll never fully know until you're going through it. And I think that's the part that I was naive about that like was the benefit. But I also was like very prepared and to even like do the research and stuff. And then every step you just learn something different. Like once I found out like, okay, I need a lab that's more boutique, spent the months to find a lab that was more boutique. Once I found it, it's like, okay, cool. What's the next step? Oh, y'all need me to give y'all reference products and then you need me to get on a conference. You just kind of figure it out. And like, I remember even after I was way down the line in the process and I had all the products and stuff, then it was like, oh, fuck, we need a website. How do I build a website? Sabir, like calling Sabir, like, yo. And then I'm like, should I use Wix or Squarespace or Shopify? And then again, it was, Kylie Jenner uses Shopify. So I'm like, if it's good enough for the Kardashian clique, it must not be too bad. So it's just like literally every step of the way, I just didn't really know, but almost in not knowing helped me go into that next step without fear.
Now, when you started, how much did you start with? How much did you have to save up to that point? And saying, okay, I'm ready to start this brand. How much were you looking at?
Man, I get so pissed off when I think about this too. I started Cali Handsome with about, I think I just had like $2,000 at first. And then as I was putting together different presentations to go ask people for money, my dad had seen one and he was like, well, how much would your first batch of inventory be? And I was like, well, like $8,000. So he was like, I'll spot you, but you're gonna have to pay this back in a timely manner. He drafted up a contract and everything. And thankfully at that point in time, he had a few dollars to like loan me. So all in all, I had $8,000. But the reason why I get pissed off about it when I think about it is like, I will never again start a business using my own capital because now I know that you don't have to. I could have started Cali Handsome with $500, and that would have just been the money to cover getting my LLC and all that. At that point, I could have gone to a bank and got a line of credit for $13,000 on a Monday. What's today? Monday? You know what I mean? So knowing what I know now, like I would have never used my own capital. But
what's the pros and cons of that? Like going to family, right, or going to a bank, in the beginning to get capital. What's the pros and cons?
I guess like the pros of using your own like cash resources is that you're not in debt to anybody else. The con is like you're gonna need that cash to live, so it's more risky that like you have that cash like tied up versus like you go to a bank, especially once you get like things formalized and all that, and there's protective measures you can put in place where like even if Cali Handsome went under today, Rocky Collins, would be protected because there's so many barriers in place legally and business wise where I would be protected. And that's where I feel like it is such a powerful weapon and tool to use capital from banks when you're starting a new business, because you just never know. You know what I mean? You never know. And I remember going into my bank and just I would just wanted to open up a business checking account because I'm like, okay, I'm going to start launch on this day. I need a checking account so like money can come in. And the business advisor was like, okay, do you want a business credit card too? And I was like, oh, I can get one. She's like, yeah, sure. I mean, I'm sorry, it's going to have to be 13K and I can't give you more. I was like, sorry, it's 13K. Like that's more than it cost for my entire, damn near year that it took me to get to that point. So I was like, damn, if I'd have known that's all I needed to do, I would have never used my own cash. I would have never like put myself in that financial bind. I would have never put my dad in that situation if I knew I could have just went to a bank.
What was the terms on that 13,000? Was that based on a credit score? And then what was the terms of like paying that money back?
Yeah, so they ran whenever you get like a business credit card, they like run, and business line of credit, they run your personal credit. If your business doesn't have credit yet and you're not started, they'll run your personal credit. I've thankfully always had decent credit. And it's just like a credit card. Like, I don't remember exactly what the percentage was, but it's like, you only pay back what you use, and every month you pay back like whatever the minimums are on that card. It's not like, oh, if I spend all 13K in development, then I need to like pay back all 13K like before the month's over. It literally operates just like your credit card. At that point, to be very frank with you, I didn't even look at what the percentage was, like the interest rate, because it didn't matter. At that point, by the time I went into Chase, I was like 2 months away from launching, and I was so committed to doing it that I'm like, whoever's going to give me capital, however I need to get it, whatever the terms need to be, give me. Like,
yeah.
I've been in this thing for a year now, and we are going to fucking launch.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's so you ended up then getting the capital from the credit card, right? The credit line that you open up, and I think it's important that like I like that you highlighted, hey, I went to and I raised from family and friends, right? Or I could have used this credit card. We hear founders all the time talking about how they maxed out 8 credit cards just to get their company to the starting line, not to the finish line, to the starting line. And I think that, this is one of those instances where you have to learn how to leverage credit.
Yeah, you do.
Right? In your business. It's not always a bad thing. And I think that it's looked down upon. And like, when even growing up in my family, credit is looked down upon. That's what we're also taught.
We're not taught how to use it.
Correct. And so, just make sure you understand what you're signing up for, understand the terms, and understand that there's multiple paths to getting capital to start an idea. And then there's also the path of, the money that you save up, and you have this run rate of, okay, I could afford 6 months to operate this business as well. And so I like how, you talked about that, because there's people wondering, where'd you get the money? Like, did someone give you a loan of $1 million? Like, did L'Oreal sponsor? People are probably wondering that. So I'm glad you were able to.
I get that question all the time. People are like, oh my God, how'd you launch a luxury skincare business for men? Did you have like $40,000? And I'm like, no, I had $2,000. Like, and I realistically could have done it for $500, knowing what I know now. You know what I mean? But I think to your point about people maxing out 8 different credit cards before they get to the start, that's where I think it's very important to have a plan in place and not just being out here. Like, credit is not the thing you want to leverage when you're like flailing around trying to figure out how, like, what the fuck. Like, credit is something you should leverage like when you really have a plan, because it's not free money and you're going to have to pay that shit back.
Right. And so you get capital, you start building out the business, you have a business plan because you start researching, etc. What was year 1 of the business like? So you launched, what happened in year 1?
Ooh, lots of learning. I think when I first launched, everything from like the marketing to the brand speak and all that, it was based on what I thought a men's skincare brand should look like, instead of like going back to like, just the values that I had for me personally and the things that I thought were interesting and the brand speak for me and my friends that I thought would resonate. I wasn't looking at that. I was literally like, okay, what should a men's skincare brand look like? I mean, guys would like dark colors, so let's, I mean, I didn't end up using teal, but like all the marketing images were like dark and moody. Like, it was completely different from what we have now. And so like launching that, I think at first it was kind of like hype around it, your friends and family are excited. So like a lot of like sales were coming in at first. And this was the first like soft launch that we had was Black Friday in 2019. It was the end of November in 2019. And so when we started, it was that holiday period, like end of November and all of December. And I believe I cleared like 11.5K. So in my mind, I'm like, oh shit, I did this in a month and a half. Like, yo, we might be rocking and rolling. But then like reality sets in after the holiday period's over, after your friends and family are done, like, gassing you up, and you really need to get like actual customers that you don't know. That shit was hard because I was like, damn, my brand is like not resonating and I don't know why. And then you just learn like at that point, two years ago, men's skincare wasn't widely talked about. So a big barrier, like a huge obstacle, was educating guys on why they needed to use a face wash and not soap and water. Like all of those things I was learning. So, and it just sucked too because I remember being like, damn, I just spent like nearly a year trying to figure out how to even get this thing to market. And I didn't even think about, okay, once it's on the market, like how do you how are you gonna fucking sell this thing? I didn't think about that. So to be kind of slapped in the face at that point, I was just like,
Yeah, and I think this is the common problem entrepreneurs have.
oh yeah, you talking about
They
yeah,
focused, they spend 6 to 8 months, a whole year, 12 months,
yeah,
just building out the idea, right? They go into this cave, they're building, their head down, and then they launch, and then they look up and be like, wait a second, I actually have to know how to sell
yes,
what I just created.
yes,
And I see this happening all the time. Again, all the time. People are
yeah,
and so now they get frustrated because when they launch, they got a lot of sales the first day, the first month, but then after that, sales start tapering off. And they're like, well, why isn't sales happening? And then you tell them, hey, you have to actually learn how to market what you're
yeah,
doing.
yeah,
And then they get frustrated because they're like, well, how much time does that take? So you're telling me
and money.
you're willing to spend 12 months on your idea, but you're then willing to spend 12 minutes on the marketing aspect.
Yeah,
You have to put the same level of effort into building the business as you are into marketing the business, the products and services.
absolutely.
So you realize this, you're like, wait a second, I have to figure out a way to make sales that don't include friends and family.
yeah.
So what did you do in order to sort of learn how to market your products?
Well, for one, I joined your accelerator, Power Your Launch. Shout out to PYL. But in full honesty and disclosure, like when I first signed up and got into the course, it goes back to like people not wanting to put the full time in. So I'm like, damn, this shit is a lot. I thought I was gonna come in here, knock it out on the weekend, and have high converting ads like on Facebook and Instagram and everywhere else, Pinterest and shit. But it was so much work that I honestly didn't have the discipline to like. And at that point, I was still working full time. So like Cali, that was a benefit that I had with launching Cali Handsome. There was no pressure on the business to be financially successful overnight because I was still working full time. And at that point, when we talked about all those promotions before, I had got to a level at Guess where I was like very comfortable financially. So I was still working full time, and I was able to allow myself time to kind of dig into the marketing a little bit. But what really changed the game was, so I told y'all I had the soft launch in November of 2019. 2020 happened, the top of 2020, fucking COVID came. And when COVID came, my products are made in a facility in upstate New York. And all the ingredients are sourced globally and then brought to New York, upstate. And that's where everything is like put together. But like componentry in the plastic containers, all that shit is coming from China. So when China shut down, they were like, yo, sorry, like we don't have containers. So like you can't get product. So I couldn't get products, so I couldn't sell shit. So at that point, the only thing that I had to focus on was like creating content, marketing, and not marketing in a sense where it was like doing ads, but I knew I needed to keep the Instagram running, or like this whole buzz from this soft launch was going to fucking die. And the reason why that was a benefit was because instead of looking at sales numbers and worried about like all that driving traffic, I was able to really just like learn what my audience engaged with when I like posted on Instagram and stuff. And one of the biggest things that I learned, which I slap myself now about it, is I noticed that the Cali Handsome content that I posted on my personal Rocky Collins Instagram account had much stronger engagement, and people just fucked with it and vibe with it more. And I even got more customers like asking about it the way I spoke about Cali Handsome on my own page instead of the way I spoke about it on the Cali Handsome page. So now I had to look at it like, damn, when you speak about it through the Rocky Collins like way, it's like successful. There's like traction starting here. versus when you try to do it this cookie cutter, this is what a men's brand should be way, and I did all the research on men's brands and black bottles, and men's feel more comfortable with this, all that. When I tried to like push it via the Cali Handsome way at that time, it wasn't working. So the thought there was like, okay, this is not working because you're not being authentic. And people don't want another cookie cutter brand. They want something that's really going to be rooted and like fun, or whatever your brand personality is. And so when I started injecting more of like, to be just real too, my own personality into the brand, when I started like fronting the brand more. And at first, all of our marketing campaigns, like I never would be in them. I would hire people, get other people. There's an article on my Instagram page, if you scroll down, where it says my $5,000 marketing mistake that I made in the beginning. Again, trying to do this campaign that I thought a men's skincare brand should look like. Y'all, save your money. Don't ever do something for your brand that you think it should be just because, that's what you think a brand in that sector should look like. Do what's real to you, because authenticity is the shit that gets through. And that's what I learned during COVID when you couldn't get products. So it was all just content and speaking to your audience to make sure they like, don't forget about me. Cali Handsome is here. The more I injected like the like true authentic personality in a Cali Handsome, the more it started to resonate, and people just started engaging, and the brand page started growing in followers wise, but also people started becoming interested. Like, damn, let me get some of that.
Yeah.
And I would even just start doing face masks and stuff on my personal Instagram, which we don't have a face mask, but it was like people were just engaging with that whole, men's skincare wave. And it was because like I just had my regular personality, I got my rings, my watches, like, you know what I mean? And people weren't used to seeing skincare in that way.
Yeah.
But I think that's where the biggest shift happened when COVID happened and I couldn't focus on selling. So content was the only thing to focus on. I started to, very visually see the content that guys were engaging with and where they weren't. And the biggest difference was the authenticity.
Yeah, and I think that, a lot of people later find that out, about their brand. The reason why even artists like Cardi B, the reason why certain products, because it's authentic, right? You speak to your audience in a way that, they understand, versus trying to speak to them in a way they have no idea. If you took what you learned at L'Oreal and some of the products you worked on, high end, and you try to talk to your audience, in that manner, it may not work, right? It may not work. Now, you're also building a high-end brand, but your audience is different, right?
And
that's the key right there. You have to understand, who am I actually serving?
Yeah.
And how are they talking about this when I'm not around? Because that's the language that I need to use in order to resonate with them.
Yeah.
And so
so crazy.
So year one, right. Year one. And now looking back, you're like, man, like, why didn't I? And you know this.
Yeah, I know. And I know this, like, it's just crazy. It's crazy. Like, I archived all those old Cali Handsome posts now, but like, if anybody was able to see them, you would have thought that brand was for like a 30 plus, lower 40-year-old white man. Because that was like the market research for what a luxury skincare brand looked like. That's how they were all speaking. So I thought that's how I needed to speak. The Cali Handsome didn't start getting traction until I spoke from a millennial who, like the finer things.
Right.
Millennial men who like the finer things. Millennial black men who like finer things. Once I started speaking through that lens, it was just kind of like, duh. Then I was just like, I was like kicking myself. But, you live and you learn.
And I think that's really, really good that you shared that, the reason why it started taking off is you decided to double down on content during the pandemic. Instead of focusing on sales, you said, wait, I need to take a step back.
Yeah.
What doesn't make sense? Because it's hard to sell something with content that's not for your audience. And so you said, let me take a step back. Let me create the content that my audience resonates with. And then you circled back into selling.
Yep.
And so what's your product suite like? And how is Cali Handsome doing today?
Yeah. So it was, that whole circle back of like finding our voice, and then once like things started opening back up and like product came, it literally was like night and day. Because then even when I ran ads, the ads were more successful, just because speaking to my audience was different, better, more rooted. And then also like targeting, where I said before, like when I first joined PYO, I wasn't really putting in the time, as much, but during the pandemic I had nothing but time. So just getting better at all those things. So now where we are, is we have 3 essential skincare products. We have a foaming face wash, we have a skin tonic toner, and then a face moisturizer. All of our products are algae based, seaweed based. That's like the core of Cali Handsome's skincare regimen. Is everything stems from like a seaweed based formula. And then from there, I just kind of wanted to select very specific things that do tremendous things for skin that people don't really know about. Like Irish moss, like our face wash is after the algae, the next biggest component is the Irish moss, and like all the benefits that like when people, it's crazy too because people got on this wave of sea moss and all the things it can do for your body, and it's like, yo, if you think it can do that for your body, like what do you imagine it could do for your skin? Like, come on, bro, like I shouldn't have to fight you on this, you know? But so we have that. The toner is the one that I think people lack the most education on, where it's misleading. When you think of toner, you hear the word toner, you think it's going to do something to your skin tone, but it doesn't. Like that's not what necessarily a toner is. Not to change like the tone of your skin. It can help with dark spots and all of that good stuff, sure, but it really can be a deeper cleansing step that's not like harsh like an astringent or like witch hazel, but something that can really also nourish your skin at the same time and like balance the oils that you need. And then the moisturizer is probably the step that guys miss the most because they're like, oh, I don't need a face lotion, or my skin is usually oily anyway. And it's just it's crazy because like every time I try to break it down to a guy, I'm like, okay, when you're hot outside, your body produces sweat to cool itself down. If your skin is dry, your body can overproduce oils to like hydrate it. So if you moisturize from the onset, you can kind of you can limit that process of like overproduction of oils in your skin. And so like whenever I hear guys talk about not using a moisturizer, I'm like, ugh. But anyway, with the moisturizer too, I wanted to make sure it had like vitamin C in it because everything. I mean, I'm into my appearance. I wanted like that glow, like a subtle glow, just make you feel better about yourself. So those were just the 3 products that I started with, and then it wasn't until the pandemic that I ended up like also barbershops and stuff got closed down. So I started cutting my own hair and all that. And one thing led to the next. It was definitely quite the process, but that's how I ended up coming up with the MVP beard pencil.
And talk about that because the beard pencil then launched your business into a whole nother stratosphere.
Yeah.
Not only in terms of like revenue, but also the presence of the business itself.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we got back on track after COVID, we really just had the 3 skincare products, which at this point we're doing well because the speak was resonating with our audience. And then also once people tried it, the reviews that we got on our website and all that helped tremendously. And then when it came to the beard pencil, I was in Palm Springs or whatever with some friends, and I was, trying to cut my own hair again because barbershops were closed. So I was trying to cut my beard. I had like cut into my beard one time, and I was pissed about it. And my friend Courtney Neal was like, "Yo, I could, we can fix that." And I remember using her eyebrow pencil, and I was like, "Oh shit." So then I was like, "Damn, I could color my patches and stuff. Maybe there's something here." But in me trying to use an eyebrow pencil, it just had a whole bunch of issues. Like it kept breaking. It was too thin. If my beard was like longer than this, it wouldn't like work. So I'm like, okay, there's something to being able to line and fill your beard. But like none of these like products that I'm trying right now are actually quite like doing it in a way that's most efficient. So that's what got me to like thinking about developing the MVP beard pencil. And yeah, we launched that in January. It launched on my birthday, January 14 of 2021. And like, within the first month and a half became our number 1 product.
Wow.
Like right now, that beard pencil alone is 60% of our revenue.
Wow.
Like it's doing more in that one product than all 3 of the skincare products combined. And the skincare products are not even just on Cali Handsome, but they're also on express.com. So they have that distribution channel. The beard pencil only has calihandsome.com, and it's still the majority of the business. And what's crazy is I developed that beard pencil to target a very specific need that I had with like patches in my beard and like wanting to keep a fresh lineup on my beard in between barbershop appointments. But what I saw was guys started using it on their hairlines. I have a baldy, y'all. Like I don't have like hair to use that on. So I didn't even think about, guys could use it on their hairlines. But when I saw customers started to make videos and do photos and even leave reviews, it's like, yo, it's great for your hairline. And one of my friends who has a like reverse widow's peak, he like used it on his hairline, was like, yo, this literally brought me back. It like opened up my eyes to like a much bigger market where I'm like, wait, a lot of guys deal with hair loss, and a lot of guys actually deal with hair loss pretty young. Like it's crazy. Like 66% of guys like experience hair loss before the age of 33. Like by the time you get to like your low 40s, that numbers becomes 85%. I personally lost my hair at 24. Like my corners faded too much where I had to just go to the barber and be like, give me a baldy. I was 24 years old when that happened to me. So it's crazy. I developed that product with such a specific aim, and then it kind of took a life of its own and opened me up to this market of guys battling, whether it's like hair loss or a patchy beard or whatever the case may be. And that has literally shifted the company more into like the beauty space, where prior to the beard pencil, we were 100% a skincare company for men. Like people be like, oh, can you do like a beard oil and stuff? And I love beard oils, but that just wasn't really what I had in the vision and in the plan. So I'm like, oh no, we're fine. Like we're just gonna stick to skincare and like expand on that. Once that beard pencil came out, I remember having a conversation with you where I'm like, yo, I wouldn't be surprised if 2 years, like you'd be like, yo, can I get a face wash? I'm like, yeah, we don't do that no more. But like,
right.
that beard pencil has opened my eyes into this market of, I mean, not even for lack of better words, what it is male cosmetics, but done in a way that's for men. And when you see these other brands now, like Alex Rodriguez and Hims and all that type of stuff, like they're making, you know, just concealers and things that women have already been using and just like packaging them in a way that's for men. And I think tools like the MVP beard pencil and other things that we have going on are like very specific to like male things.
Who would have thought a beard pencil?
A beard pencil, bro. Like who would have thought that would like not only change the face of my company essentially, but like you said, took us to a different level. Like, I mean, before the beard pencil, even when skincare was, you know, doing well, and again, I was working full time for a while when skincare was out. When we start having like, you know, $2,000 months, $3,000. Once my like CALI HNDSME started being able to cover my rent, I was like, oh, skincare is doing all right. Maybe I can leave my job. Then I remember like once we launched the beard pencil and that thing alone in like 1 month was like $5K by itself, I was like, oh shit, like that is what I need to lean into more.
You were on to something.
Yeah.
You were on to something.
And quite frankly, I find myself more excited about the innovations that can happen in that space and like the male grooming beauty industry. Like it's because, you know, there's some tools that we can use for like subtle fixes, whether it's your beard or your hairline, and these tools are not on the market yet. So.
And that's a really good point. And before we wrap up, where do you see the industry going? The male cosmetics industry or male's cosmetic space? Where's that going?
It's just growing at a tremendous rate right now. I think like, I mean, we already see it now. There's brands like Faculty, which is they just got $3 million in seed funding from Estee Lauder. They just have 3 nail polish colors. Like there's all these different type of brands and products coming into this male beauty space that people are really believing in. You have Hims with Alex Rodriguez that are doing like the concealer, like blur sticks and all that type of thing. It's really wide open. It's wide open because you also have like heterosexual rappers now that are also like coming out with their nail colors and all that type of stuff. And you see the ASAP Rockies and stuff. And the more we see the stigma pulled away from like beauty for men, the more products are going to be in the market and the more the consumers are going to have a demand for it. So they're going to be like, damn, like it's actually nice. Like his manicure is actually cool. I kind of want that. Or he got like nice letter on there. I want that. Or like, damn, he keeps his beard flawless. I want that. Or I always had a patchy beard and now I can have a flexed out beard and don't have to worry about like, is it going to be dyed? Is it going to be like dripping? Guys are going to have a demand for that. And it's the market is crazy. And the crazy thing too is in Asia, the market is already like very mature. And then you get to the UK and it's like quite mature too. The American market for male beauty is just being built. It's like just scratching the surface of it. And that's the thing that I'm most excited about, that CALI HNDSME can be a part of building what the American market for male beauty and male cosmetics products looks like.
Wow. Like, who would have thought, right? Beard
Who would
pencil.
have fucking thought?
And this was really, really good. And we could sit here and talk all day because there's so much nuances of business.
Yeah.
And because I know you, I see it all, the behind the
Yeah,
scenes
yeah.
and the front. So, I really, really appreciate you and the time that you were able to give us today. And we'll have to have you back on for a second episode because, again, there's so much that we could talk about.
Yeah.
And so before we wrap up, Rocky, where could people find out about you and where could people learn more about you?
Yeah, so the brand is Cali Handsome, and it's Cali like California, CALI. And then handsome is missing the first two vowels. So it's HNDSME, Cali Handsome. You can find us at calihandsome.com. The Instagram for the brand is just at Cali Handsome. My personal Instagram is at The Rocky Collins, TheRockeyCollins. So that's the Instagrams, the websites. You can email us at info@calihandsome.com if you have any questions and all of that good stuff. Tune into our content. You can find us on express.com. You can go on express.com under labels we love. You'll find Cali Handsome products there, skincare products, and other retail partners launching within the next few months. So
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Rocky, for joining this episode.
Yeah.
And for those of you listening in, I hope you were able to get a lot of nuggets and gems and how to navigate and how to determine your value. And, sometimes it's an unexpected product that you don't even see coming that really propels your business forward. So
facts.
Thank you all for listening in, and I will see you all during the next episode. All right.